There's a pretty one, Ulysses. There it is.
Hello, BookTube. I'm Shawn of Shawn Breeze Books, and I'm here with another episode of Zooming In, which is an occasional, definitely is occasional of late, occasional series where I engage with other bookish social media luminaries the world over to talk about bookish topics, jumping off some kind of an article or other. And today, back for his umpteenth appearance on my channel, you've all been clamoring for him to come back. Bob of Bob the Booker. Hello, Bob.
Hello, hello. I feel like I should get a loyalty card at this point. Sort of
Absolutely.
10 and I get, I don't know, a free book or something. Hello, hi.
We're here to talk about a fun article that was in LitHub just a few weeks ago called My Book Recommendations versus Your Book Recommendations. That's from June
Mm,
3rd by James Folta. And it is actually quite whimsical with, I think, more than a kernel or two of truth about recommending books versus having books recommended to you. So, Bob, what did you make of this?
yeah, I thought it was very different to what I was expecting from the title. But yeah, obviously it's quite a silly and tongue-in-cheek article, but there's something about that idea of it, and I know we'll get into it, but I find book recommendations quite strange, and particularly, I think, increasingly so since being on YouTube. And so actually, some part of that really hit for me of it's very strange now to know how to do this. I find the same actually with like lists for birthdays, right? When someone says, "Oh, what book would you like?" and I have to do this sort of game in my head of actually what do I want? Do I want this other thing? Do I leave it to chance? So many things. And I think if you're someone who reads quite a lot, book recommendations become can be both a brilliant and thorny thing at the same time.
Brilliant and thorny, absolutely. That's the exact phrase that comes to mind when I think of Bob the Booker. Yeah, I think there's something about power. There's a sense of,
Mm,
as the recommender, you are assuming some kind of a power over the person you're recommending to. And so I'm much more comfortable by virtue of what we do on BookTube. We
mm,
are recommending books, or maybe we're
yeah.
recommending that people not read books, but that we're the ones doing the recommending. And
Right.
so I do feel funny when somebody recommends books to me because I guess my first thought is, do I seem like I need recommendations? I've got all these books. But yet, how do we find out about our books if somebody doesn't recommend them to us? But this really struck a chord with me that there's an emotional kind of psychological thing at play with
Mm.
the person doing the recommending versus the person receiving the recommendation. And how do you see what you do on BookTube and through the lens of this kind of admittedly whimsical thing about the dynamics at work?
Yeah, in some ways, doing it through BookTube is a weird version of this, right? Because in normal day-to-day life outside of BookTube, it would be really easy to say, oh, actually, this is my friend Bill. Bill really likes this type of book. He's also this kind of person. I think he's got this level of tolerance for experimental weird stuff. And you can work it out from there, right? Oh, I think he might quite like this. It's quite easy to work out a birthday present kind of thing. But with BookTube, you obviously it has to be so not broad, but I feel like I have to play a lot more of, hey, here's what I like. If
Yeah.
our tastes happen to overlap on these other things, maybe you'll like this. Or if you like books with tight characterization, little character studies about this kind of thing, this may appeal to you. And so sometimes I find it quite weird. I think I often, when I'm doing reviews on BookTube, the only way I think I can make that work without having a million little sort of neurons firing off in my head at the same time in contrast to each other is to basically just say, do I like it? Because I think anything else, I think becomes this real thing of I've had it before where I've said I really loved, let's think of an example, something like I enjoyed Tomorrow and Tomorrow, and I also enjoyed some other sort of biggish book. And there were quite a lot of people I spoke to on BookTube who hated one and loved the other. And and actually, it was quite often the case where it was people who hated Tomorrow and Tomorrow really loved this other book, and I kind of liked both. So I was like, well, actually, I accidentally upend this whole equation, right? Where typically people who thought that this book didn't do enough of this, but thought this book did. There's a thing of okay, we can meet in the middle, and if I like this book more than this book, maybe this one's for you. But that becomes a lot more complicated, and that's the only way I think I know how to do it. How do you find it with with BookTube because it's so personal, but also to some degree there is an element of yay or nay that you're doing.
Yeah, I like what you said about that you do your best to describe what you love, and then the
Yeah.
rest of it is it's on the viewer, it's on the person watching. How much of our channels do they watch in order to assess whether our tastes overlap or not? And I often joke on my channel that I think I have a sizable minority of people that watch me that don't like the kind of books I like. So they're here to hear about the books that I don't like because they might be.
Yes.
And it's so subjective. It's so subjective. The other thing I want to get
Yeah.
in this conversation is that the most important thing we do. Two of my, and I'm not going to say anything to identify them, but two of my most loyal viewers, subscribers, one of them, I think, I'll use they pronouns. I think they have only ever read one book that I have praised on my channel. And the other one, as far as I know, has never read any. And they're my most
Interesting.
two of my most supportive people. So they're not here for my book recommendations. It's interesting.
Yeah. I think I quite like the idea of when people talk about BookTube or podcasts or whatever, as it's being almost more like a sommelier, right? You're to some degree you are sampling or bringing in several different things, and you're saying these are all on the menu. This is a book you may not have heard of that I'm bringing to your attention, telling you is on the menu. You can then do with this as you will. And to some degree, if you like the way I talk about the notes of this book, then maybe this is for you. It's a sort of particularly tragic queer coming of age novel. Okay, great. Actually, maybe that's the kind of thing that appeals to you and how it exists. And to some degree, I like that framing of BookTube is it's more kind of finding out some stuff that exists, reading it, and then bringing it to the table. And be like, oh, let's share. What do you think? And quite a lot of the time, I get really nice recommendations in the comments. But that's the tricky. I think that's an interesting balance sometimes because yeah, that is wholly reliant potentially on how I describe the thing, my engagement with it, if I liked it. Because typically, if I really hated a book, I don't bring it up that often, unless it's part of a prize list that I'm going over or whatever. It's quite rare that if I really hate something, I talk about it. And so it's quite strange sometimes because there is some element of you're getting the Bob's best bits, the things I liked most, or things I found interesting in some ways, more than necessarily like here are 10 books from the last however many weeks or whatever. Yeah, there's some degree where you're always presenting a version of what you've read, and to some degree that power thing you're talking about, or at least even if it's not power, the kind of gatekeeping isn't the right word either, but there is some element of essentially whatever you are seeing is what I have brought to it. And obviously there are many other booktubers who build up this sort of patchwork of all of these other things, right? And because there's the stat that typically for people to buy a book, they normally have to hear about it, I think 4.2 or something times, right? It's four, around four. And so to some degree, it's myself, you, two other booktubers, that could be it. But actually, if a few of us don't bring it up, then that shifts that potentially.
And sometimes I find myself that when I'm watching another booktuber and they start to review a book and I can tell how excited, how passionate they are, that's when I turn off the review. Because
Oh,
I don't want to hear any
interesting.
more about it. They introduced me to it. I will read it in the
Right.
fullness of time and then come back and find and see how much I
Mm.
read with them. But I pick up on the vibe of the way they start to talk about it, and then that's all I want. But that's important that if I really trust that booktuber in terms of a match connect between our tastes, then I'll follow up. One with you,
Mm.
a couple of with you recently that I've talked to you about privately was
Oh, yeah.
Last Song. What is it called?
Oh, the Nathan Evans book. One last song?
One Last Song by Nathan Evans, which I loved. I wasn't sure about it in the middle, but
Yes,
by the
excellent.
end, I absolutely loved it. And I
Same.
heard about it on your channel, and I don't think that I listened to your full review because I didn't want to hear any more about it, but I did read it
Yeah.
and I loved it. Like I say, it was a bit of a bumpy ride, but by the end, I thought, oh yeah, this is a lovely, important,
So lovely.
just
And it,
poignant novel. Yeah.
yeah. If you ever hear Nathan reading from it as well, it's actually really entertaining because he does all the
I
voices
I can only
and
imagine. I
it's
can
there's a real I don't know if you've ever I don't know how much they're known outside of the UK actually, but the Carry On films. And there's a very kind of Carry On film quality to one of the characters, the Joan. So, side point.
Oh,
But
I don't know about this carry on thing. Can you tell us about that?
oh, these were like very camp. British films from I think the 70s, a bit into the 80s as well, I think. Very, very silly, very double entendre, incredibly camp, quite quite risque for the time, and some of them haven't aged particularly well. But they occupy a very specific place in British comedy and British pop culture.
That's great. And then the other one was William Trevor's The Story of Lucy Galt.
Oh,
Yeah, and
yeah.
I think maybe that was when the first time that you and I made a video together, just a general
Mm,
get to know each other Zoom chat, which was lovely. God, how many years ago was that? Maybe that's when you talked about it, but
gosh.
I know you talked about it on your channel, and I finally read it this year and loved it.
I
Yes.
think this is the thing with recommendations, actually, that coming to it, that actually I'm often fairly slow to act on it because I've got so many other things already queued up.
Absolutely.
And so it is actually a tricky thing. And for the article, there's that sort of thing of that the idea that when you recommend books, it's this free and easy thing that you can just be like, oh my God, read this thing. Yeah. When someone gives you a recommendation, it feels like not a duty, but there's some kind of task, right? Of I may love this, but I can't just wander into this. I have to do something about it and experience it, which can be great. But
And isn't there something too that I know for me, there's a thing where what if I read it and I don't like it? Then I am obligated to talk about it on my channel, and this subscriber or this other booktuber recommended it so passionately, and that's what makes me uncomfortable. So I don't get around to reading
yeah,
it.
that can be really tricky. I think if someone really loves something and they recommend it, I've had people comment on my videos being like, okay, I read this thing that you really highly recommended and I hated it. And you're like, okay, fair, sorry. I don't know, in some ways I'd rather that they hated it than just were lukewarm. I think as long as it's conjured up some image or some feeling in you, that's probably more fun than just like a book that just left you completely cold. But I think yeah, it's always a tricky thing because it's so personal and so subjective that I think books in general, it's that case anyway. I often find this, I joke about this, although it's fairly true, that I'm a mostly fairly generous reviewer, or I like quite a lot of things, I guess. And so sometimes that leads to quite difficult things because I've spoken about it. There are tiers to this where maybe that was a 4-star read that I thought was perfectly fine and I enjoyed some quality to it. And somebody else reads it and it's just like, why, what's this? And actually, it wasn't a 5-star for me, but it was a very solid read, I thought. And that's very different to me completely enthusing about a book that I adored and that I think is a very clear 5-star kind of thing for me.
And I think you will agree with me. I'm expecting that this will resonate for you too, that often my hot take is not that months later, my opinion will change. Sometimes I will like
Mm,
better with the passage of time. Sometimes it'll not be aging so well. So there's
yeah.
also that. So can you quote yourself? She's Canadian and she lives in the UK, I think. She was on the Women's Prize and was she also on the Booker? It's a very poetic novel, Held by Anne
Oh,
Michael.
Held. Yes.
I remember what you commented. Somebody on I hated that book, except the first chapter was gorgeous, and then the rest of
Yeah.
nonsense. I thought beautiful poetic nonsense. Somebody who was it was maybe it was Bernie. I'm not sure, but somebody posted about it and said they didn't really care for it. And do you remember what you left on your comment?
No, I can't remember now.
I don't think I can quote you very accurately, but it really cracked me up because you said, "Yeah, when I read it, I thought, oh, this is just gorgeous work of literature." Now these all these months later, I think it was about the war.
Yes. I then reread it actually because
Did you?
I was so annoyed that I could not remember a thing. And I reread it. It was like, oh, and because it was getting shortlisted for prizes up the wazoo. And I just thought, okay, let's give this another shot. And I did enjoy it more the second time. Again, if you ask me what it's about, it's a very floaty book.
Oh,
But that's actually, I think, also that's sometimes a really tricky thing with recommendations, is sometimes it's connected with you or not connected with you for reasons sometimes outside of the book. Or this book means a lot to me because I read it at the right time and it resonated with my personal experience. And actually recommending this book to someone feels very different. To say, actually, here's a book that is in many ways a mirror of my own coming out experience, for example. And so it means a lot to me, but I also recognize that this is a book that won't necessarily be universal in quite the same way. And the thing I find with recommendations, and I'm really curious about how this looks for you as well, is also for me, if you are recommending to someone who reads quite a lot and reads quite broadly and reads sort of various different genres and is okay with a bit of experimental stuff, for example, or somebody who maybe reads a few books a year. And for me, those recommendations feel so different
Yes.
Because sometimes I think actually if this is going to be the one, if you're going to be reading this book for 2, 3 months, I want this to be something quite enjoyable. I'm not going to give you A Little Life by Hanya Yanagihara. That might be a bit much.
Thank you.
You're welcome. But for some people, if this is the kind of thing you might like, that book might be perfect for you, although it's still a bit of an intense book. But yeah, actually, if for example, you don't often have time to read much, I want to give you something a bit lighter. I want to give you something that makes you feel like you're getting on with something in terms of a plot's moving forward, or it's a really challenging and thought-provoking book. I want to give you that. Whereas if someone reads quite a lot, I think actually maybe now's the time to dial up the experimentation, right? Of, okay, you really enjoyed this. What if you had that kind of book, but it's written in free verse, or that kind of thing where you can poke at it a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. How do you find that? Because I think it's interesting. I guess we're in a very, very bookish bubble, not only with probably a lot of our personal life, but obviously also our booktube life.
I return to how you started this because you set it off just on the right foot, which was that you just tried to express what it meant to you, why you loved it. And
Yeah.
that's mainly what I do. I have maybe a handful of people, and they're mostly in real life connections, like family or close friends, where I know their reading taste really deeply. And I've learned by
Mm,
trial and error. Like most of the books over the last 10 years that I've recommended to my mom, for example, she hasn't liked it all or couldn't finish. So,
right.
but
Right.
now I understand her taste better and so on. And those people, I feel like I can make a very personal recommendation. And certain of my viewers, where they have loved so many books that I loved, that I feel confident that they will probably love this
Mm,
one. But beyond that, I just try to express as best I can why I did or didn't like the book and let people make their own choices. But again, going back to the fact that two of my biggest champions or whatever don't read the books that I talk about, that maybe that's not the most important thing that I'm doing is
mm.
recommending books. I don't know. I'm going to spring this on you and see what you say.
Oh dear.
It didn't occur to me until we've been talking, but how about we recommend a book to each other
Oh
right
gosh.
now,
Okay.
right here, and
Oh,
we agree that in about a year we'll come back and talk about those books, one
I think I
each.
have one. I think I have one for you. Potentially two.
When you're ready, please go.
Okay, so it's two I've got in mind, but the one that I think would appeal to you most, maybe, and I'm trying to think where my copy is called Human Animal by Seth Insua.
That's great. I haven't read it, but I have a copy already.
Oh, okay, perfect, even better.
That's great. I think I
Uh,
will like it too. What little I know about it,
yeah,
that made me buy it. Yes.
I just think it's really stunningly done. This is now where I feel the pressure given the nature of this article, but I think it's really beautifully written. I think it's wonderfully nuanced. And I'm trying to think for you, I think there's enough for you to get your teeth into that feels enough Shawn like sort of
Okay.
elements. So there's a moral quandary at the heart of it. There are characters, some of whom I think you might hate. They're and in a good way. They're
Yeah.
meant to be disliked. And there's a sort of a beautiful story about queer identity at the heart of it as well.
Okay, great. And I did recommend this to you privately. It is by a queer Canadian writer named Christopher DiRaddo. The Family Way. It came out maybe a couple years ago, and it is a novel about a gay man. I think he might be 35, somewhere between 35 and 40. He's got a much younger boyfriend. They live in Montreal, and his best friend, who is part of a lesbian couple, ask the protagonist, the 35 to 40-year-old gay guy, to
Mm,
provide the necessary body fluid so that they can have a kid. And it's about that process, but it's about all aspects of his gay life. And he is one of the gayest protagonists in all of gay literature. Like he's just,
incredible.
and I'm not talking about his personality, although I guess I am, but like he's so involved in the gay community and he's doing this and doing that, and all his friends are gay. And it was fascinating and really quite poignant. And I'll be very curious to see what you think of it. I think you'll
Amazing.
probably like it.
Thank you. Now I'm excited for this now. I feel like that's a safe avenue to go down for me, which
That's
is
right. Look,
is either
gay,
a
gay, I think of Bob.
yeah, gay, or an Irish woman thinking about motherhood. That tends to be another winner. It's a
Oh,
joke
okay.
now with quite a lot of people I know because I think I kept on recommending books that were just Irish women contemplating motherhood and family and heritage and identity.
Okay, well then,
It just
have,
kept becoming a trend.
have you read The Language of Remembering?
No.
Oh, should we do two each? If we're gonna
Okay.
knock, if we don't have to come back for a year,
Okay.
my second one will be a debut Irish novel by Patrick Holloway,
Okay.
The Language of Remembering, and it is just pretty much about what you just said, but about a whole bunch more. Beautifully written,
Okay.
and he was my mystery guest, and he's pretty hot, and this was a lovely novel, and it's the son and the mother. The mother got pregnant as a high school student, Bridget, in
Mm.
Ireland, 1977. Then in the present of the story, she has early onset Alzheimer's, and the son had been living
Right.
in Brazil, and he comes home with a wife and daughter to take care of her. And it's just, I think the title of my review was Vibrant with Language or something. It's just, they're all
Mm.
word people. It's beautifully literary, and I think you'll love it.
Nice.
Yes.
That sounds
I
very,
I have
very
not
good.
summarized it very well, but it is quite.
Nice. Okay. I almost wonder because the second one I had to it came to mind is more of a book that I loved, but I actually, in the spirit of this video, I actually don't know if it's necessarily a very Shawn book
I
or if
want to
I'm
try
just
it.
like,
I want to try it.
okay, I'd be really intrigued to hear your thoughts either way. So it's Flesh by David Szalay.
Oh, I've read two of his other books.
There we go. Okay, perfect. So, in similar, typical fashion for what he writes, from what I understand, is a lot about masculinity. And particularly, it's a very stoic and very uncommunicative man who, and because we hear the book through his lens, it's very clipped and very short. And at times, we'll go to a new chapter and 10 years would have passed because that in his mind is just, oh, he just got on with work and life moved on. And it's very rarely explained what actually happened in the 10 years. But I think it's excellent because of that. Form and function kind of work really neatly together. And also, I think it's really quite interesting and fun to have a narrator who seems to be so against being in a book. Like
Oh,
almost if this book were written by him properly, it would be about 5 pages long. And I like that quality that these details are almost being extracted and described around him against his will. Yeah, I really loved it.
I'm so glad that you recommended it because I read and really quite enjoyed Shalay's linked or not linked short stories. All That Man Is. That's the first
Mm,
on my radar, and it was controversially nominated for a Booker, which only accepts novels,
yes.
not short fiction. And I thought the claim that it was actually really a novel because it was about men at various stages of life, so that made it a novel. That's ridiculous. But anyway, I did enjoy it very much. And then I read
Yes.
Turbulence, and I don't remember anything about it, but I
Oh,
remember
okay. Was it about war?
I think vaguely. That's usually a good guess. It usually,
If you
but
can't remember what it was about war.
it was about turbulence. It was about an airplane. Must have been. But I will try Flesh, and I'm excited. So let's close with maybe bouncing off the article because it's in a way it's a snarky, whimsical article.
Right.
We haven't been snarky enough, is what I'm trying to say. So let's get some.
We need some more snark. Okay.
Yes.
Let's think what
Uh,
we can do here.
the first two. My book recommendations are perfect and well thought out. Your book recommendations are trash and invented on the spot. I don't think I ever think that about. Do I think mine are perfect and well thought out? I think when I think that it's perfect, it's because I know the other person's reading taste.
Yeah.
But
And I was going to say, because I think that flippant tone does sort of, even though it's obviously ridiculous, that it does get to something about how it feels, right? Because sometimes in your mind, you've crafted, you agonize over 4 or 5 different books and do almost like a mental chart of everything they've previously liked, not liked, and their interests to kind of whittle it down into this book. And theirs can seem more random because you're like, why on earth would you select that book for me? But then actually there is something often to it. They've also normally done that same pattern. It's just that's how it feels. Because I've still not read it, but I can't remember the author's name. The something over the Cerulean Sea.
oh,
And I've
yeah.
had it recommended to me so many times by people. And I don't know if they've just recommended it because it's queer or because they actually think I'd enjoy it. And it
Oh,
may well be
just
something I
reson
like. And so sometimes I'm like, is it just that they really enjoyed it? And when we've spoken about other books in book group, like in book club, they think, okay, he really liked this thing, which I liked, and House on the Cerulean Sea, I think would work. It could well be. But then it's happened enough times now where people have recommended that book to me that I think I should probably stop pretending this is just like a random throwaway thing and probably read it. Yeah. I don't know. I really like this bit here though. We've got my book recommendations are like a cool breeze in spring. Your
Yes.
book recommendations are like a blast of car exhaust, which feels unfair. But there is something sometimes about if you're drowning already with the amount of books you've got on a TBR, a new recommendation can feel like, oh gosh, like I'm already carrying these 47 books in my arms.
That one stood
Yeah.
out for me too, absolutely. And this one as well. The last one I will quote. My book recommendations are uncommon, but not pretentious. Your book recommendations are something we all read in middle school.
There is also something about, yeah, how you kind of come across books. Because sometimes I find this really funny with my channel because people will be like, oh, I've never heard of any of these books. And in my mind, they're quite well known because they are a Booker shortlisted book, or
Right.
they were on another prize, or it's an author whose work I've been following for a while. And so sometimes I also do forget that people will come to this in entirely different ways. And I had this recently where I was trying to talk to someone about Ali Smith, and they were like, they'd never heard of her. And it really threw me for a second because
Yeah.
Ali Smith is one of my favorite writers. I've read everything she's written. I think she's exceptional. She's been much lauded by prizes. But then actually, if she's not really had the big breakout book in quite the same way of, I don't know, something like Atonement or like a Robert Harris book or something else that would have this, that would be top of the bestseller lists. So actually, there is something about that sometimes where I think we
Yeah.
can forget what we know and what we don't know, what other people might not know.
Yeah. If you don't follow the prize list, there's a lot of writers that you wouldn't have heard of. Unless they
Yeah.
win, in which case it does spread beyond just that community of readers. Yeah. So I am not going, if I see you starting to talk about my book recommendations in the coming year, I'm going to not watch it. And so let's try to go into our follow-up discussion without knowing how the other person felt, if that's possible. Well, how
Okay.
about, and I think we need to make a checklist of some of the zinger excerpts from this article to see which ones apply.
Yes, I will. I'm waiting to see which one of your books feels like a brick that has been thrown at me, or like a car exhaust or whatever.
It's going to be fun. Looking forward to it. Bob, thanks so much. And it's a lovely spiritual light coming off the top of your head. Can you tell us any more about that?
This is just although we're in British summer, so I am also, there's a
Weltering
glow,
hot.
yeah, it's very warm for us. Not warm compared to most of the rest of the world, but for us, very warm. And all of our houses are made to keep in heat where possible. It's a tough time, but it's all good. Luckily, I don't think this camera is fully showing it, but I'm a few sort of shades of pink darker than I'd normally be.
And that's probably why you're not wearing any pants.
You always have to have something at the end here, Sean.
Thanks, dear man.
There you go. Cheers. Thank you, Sean.